DockBlock 2025 wreaked havoc on third-party docks. After all my testing, fixing, and bricking, I found the best Nintendo Switch 2 upgradable third-party dock. So make sure you stick around to find my pick in this edition of Switch 2 News Direct.
There are now dozens of third-party docks on the market for the Nintendo Switch 2, but the biggest problem isn't choosing one. It's figuring out what's actually inside them. After Nintendo's 21.0.0 system update, a large number of users discovered that their docks either stopped working or required a firmware update. And that's where things got messy. Many of these docks look identical on the outside, but internally, they use completely different chipsets. One unit might be built with a legitimate updatable USB controller, while another batch of the same exact dock could be using a cheaper clone chipset with no official support. Because of this, users are finding it difficult or impossible to update their dock's firmware. Some docks never appear in the manufacturer's update tool, others fail the handshake entirely, and a few even become permanently unusable. The root issue is simple. Most consumers don't realize they're buying a clone. Two docks with the same shell, same branding, and same box can behave completely differently once the Switch 2 checks their hardware. And until manufacturers start clearly labeling chipsets or providing proper update utilities, this confusion is likely to continue.
So last week, Nintendo dropped update 21.0.0, which pretty much wiped out most third-party docks. I did a ton of research and testing last week to create the dock series of videos. And during that testing, I've come across what I think is the best third-party dock for the average user that can be easily upgraded if Nintendo sends down another update that blocks docks. And that dock is any of the Gemdo Dongle Dock Series 2. And I'm talking the legit Gemdo dongle docks, not the Gemdo clones. We'll talk about the clones in a minute, but let's go over why I think the Gemdo dongle dock is the best dock for the average user. Number one, the firmware is easy to find, easy to download. Number two, the process to actually update the dock is simple and it's documented in the documentation given to you in the firmware package. If you're unsure about flashing firmware, updating your dock, you can check out my dock series videos from last week. In the first video, I talk about the docks being blocked. Second video is a tutorial and information on updating the firmware. And then the third video talks about bricking the docks, which I give a little bit of information to help you the best I can not to brick a dock. If you're using this Gemdo dongle dock or any of the Gemdo cable docks, your chances of bricking the dock are almost zero. I mean, there's always a chance you're going to brick it, but the way the firmware package is set up and the process of updating it, it's really easy to update these docks and get them up and running after that Nintendo update. So this is the Gemdo dongle dock because it's got the little dongle on the end and it has USB, HDMI, and your USB-C for power. The reason I like this dock is because it has pretty much everything you need in a very small travel size. This will fit into any carrying case, the small ones or the big ones. You will need to have a HDMI cable with you as well, which is kind of the downfall of this dock compared to the cable dock. But a 6-foot HDMI cable should easily fit into a case with this dock if you wind it up. So I really don't see that as being a huge issue. And again, it just has everything you need with that extra USB port right there. And the cable docks, those are pretty basic. One end has an HDMI cable on it, and on the back of the HDMI plug, you have your USB-C power port, and then you have your USB-C plug that goes into your Switch 2 on the other end. Now, having the HDMI plug built into the cable eliminates needing that extra HDMI cable if you're using the dongle. If you did wind this up with an HDMI cable and put it next to the cable dock, they both take up about the same amount of space. Price shouldn't be an issue because if you look around, you should be able to find the dongle dock or the cable dock at the same price. All that being said, the Gemdo dongle dock is my number one pick for the best third-party upgradable dock for your Nintendo Switch 2. But coming in at a close second is the S3 Max. Now, I know you haven't heard me talk about this S3 Max at all, except for maybe the first DockBlock video, is because it didn't need to be updated. So you might ask, why didn't I pick this as my number one dock if it didn't need to be upgraded? This dock has no airflow across the bottom. The Switch actually seals really well and sits tightly in here, which I like. The problem is it doesn't get airflow. Now, that being said, I did multiple tests on this way before I started this channel. And this dock actually keeps your Switch 1 Celsius cooler than the actual Nintendo dock. My problem is, since the dock is sitting tight in this slot, we're not getting any airflow, which is causing the fans to work harder. The harder the fans have to work, the shorter their life. So that's my concern, is that my fans are going to die out earlier than they should. This is too big for me for a travel dock. So really all these things I'm detailing here are what's kind of bringing me back to why this is, I think, the #1 updatable third-party dock. Keep in mind, I'm talking about the version 2. If you look closely on the dock, you'll see a 2 next to the specs on it, which is 4K 60 hertz. Now, when I talk about this dock, I'm also including the 4K 144 hertz dock. They're identical as far as upgrading and as far as how they work. One just supports 144 hertz. So that's my main pick. And before I go, I do want to talk about clone docks, because I don't think clone docks are a bad choice. These clone docks right here are basically clones of the Gemdo dock. Obviously, you can see they look very close to it. You can get these docks anywhere from $5 to $20, depending on where you're buying it from. If you shop Temu and AliExpress, that's where you can get them in that, $5 to $8 range. And they work really well, except for when they get blocked by a Nintendo firmware, because we don't really know what chipsets are inside these. Some of them can be updated with the Gemdo firmware. Some of them are able to be updated with the Hagibus firmware, which I don't even know what that is. That may be the Gemdo firmware renamed or modified to actually recognize those. But there is a Hagibus dock, and I don't know if that is a clone of the Gemdo or the other way around. Maybe Gemdos are clones of Hagibus. But either way, these third-party docks, you never know what you're going to need to update the firmware. But if you do run the wrong firmware in these docks, you could brick them like I show in my brick dock video. And at the end of the day, if you do brick it, who cares? If you paid $5 to $7, throw it in the garbage, buy another one. So to wrap this all up, my #1 pick for your Nintendo Switch 2 third-party upgradable dock is the Gemdo dongle dock, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.